When I first saw this SUV, I had to do a bit of a double take because what I didn't realize is that it's the all-new Chevy Traverse. Why was that such a surprise to me? Well, frankly, the previous generation models were a bit of a snooze fest. So not only has Chevy changed the looks completely of this vehicle, but they've actually done a lot of other things to make this a relatively compelling entry-level three-row SUV. So what we're going to be doing today is showing you why that is by taking a look outside. Inside, I'm going to show you some of the features. We're going to try and cram a bike in the back to see how usable this SUV really is. And last but not least, we're going to take it out on the road to see what it's like to drive. I've already tipped my hand a bit that I think this is a good looking SUV, but what do you think? Leave a comment below. Ultimately, in my mind, this aggressive grille really started with the Chevy trucks and it's kind of trickled down more into the SUVs, but it does have more of a unique style to it than those sort of generic blob old Traverses. I really like how they have these squinty headlights now and really interesting design tail lights as well. This is seen here in radiant red, and it's also seen here in the Z71 package, which gets things like the slightly lifted suspension, some different wheels and knobbier tires, along with a twin clutch all-wheel drive system. This is of course meant to be their off-road trim in the otherwise model lineup for the Traverse. Regardless of what trim you get, you're gonna get the same powertrain. So this is a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder turbocharged gas engine, and it makes pretty good horsepower, 328 horsepower and 326 pound-feet of torque. Those are pretty strong numbers, and this replaces, of course, the V6s of past from Chevy. All of these models also get an 8-speed transmission regardless of trim, and fuel economy is going to range depending on whether you're doing the front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive models. And this one specifically with the Z71 package with the knobbier tires gets 19 miles a gallon city and 24 highway. I've found that to be relatively true because I'm averaging just under 20 miles to the gallon, which is pretty decent for this very large three-row SUV. The interior has been a big surprise to me with the Traverse because I expected them to, of course, make the styling look really good and appealing, but they've actually done a really good job here in the interior. Sure, there are some cheap piano black plastics and some plastics on the door that I think are a bit questionable, but this is a entry-level three-row SUV, and I think you can forgive that stuff because the rest of this is really, really good. It's super spacious in here. I'm 6'1", I have a ton of room. We'll talk about the back seats here in a minute, but you're kind of swimming in room. Additionally, it's all focused around this infotainment here. You get this giant screen, and a giant screen alone will not make a vehicle, but how you interact with it, the functionality of it will. And Chevy's system is just very intuitive and easy to use. You also get native Google Maps, so you can kind of move around the map here to whatever you need, and also just the giant screen allows you to see a lot of the map. You're also getting physical controls here for your HVAC. Some of them, admittedly, are on the screen, like for your heated seats, but the temperature knob here, the auto, the fan, the defrost, all of these are physical switches, which is a nice use of, physical and digital. The other super underrated feature that this vehicle has is a very quick boot up time for the infotainment. I know that may sound a bit odd, but I get in a lot of vehicles, particularly Toyotas recently, where these systems are so advanced, they take a while to kind of get going. And it's, 15, 20 seconds before you have any of these menu structures available to you. It pairs with your phone, et cetera, et cetera. This thing boots up so fast. So they have a lot of processing power behind this. And also the screen is just really nice quality, really nice black levels. It just has like a nice wow factor to it. So very, very, very impressed by that. Some of the other features that you get, particularly in this model, the way it's spec'd is Super Cruise. Put a pin in that. We're going to talk about that immediately when we go on the drive. That's a pretty awesome feature. You also have pretty good visibility in here. The rear three-quarter visibility isn't the best, but this dash line is actually relatively low, all things considered. So it does feel like you have pretty good visibility, although I will say that the hood line is so high, it's hard to tell exactly where the front end of the vehicle is, but of course you have parking sensors to help with that. Of course, last thing to say, like the infotainment, we have a digital screen for the gauge cluster as well. That's kind of typical for these days. In terms of the back seats, this middle row, I'm swimming in headroom. I have great leg room. The third row really is meant for children. I am literally like my knees are to my chest if I try and sit in that third row. It's nice to have, and maybe you're not going to use that all the time, and you can just put those seats down, in which case there's a ton of storage back there. Speaking of a ton of storage, let's see if my mountain bike fits in the back of this thing. This may be one of the easiest SUV bike tests I've ever done. Absolutely no drama fitting my extra large frame mountain bike. Simply put, the rear opening is very wide, wider than other SUVs in this class that I've tested. If you want outright space, the Traverse really is hard to beat. As always, if you enjoyed the bike test, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button so you don't miss future videos. Before we end up on my favorite canyon road to review cars, I think it's important to highlight one of the biggest differentiators that the Traverse has in this space, and that is Super Cruise. What is Super Cruise? Well, it's really a autonomous driving capability beyond what most other vehicles have. Most other vehicles are still like, they're gonna kind of drive for you to a certain extent, but you're gonna have to have your hands on the wheel. This is full hands off the wheel stuff in certain scenarios. And I like to do it in this specific spot because the last time I used Blue Cruise, which is Ford's equivalent, with that F-150 that I had, it got tripped up here. So I wanted to show you that I think this is the best self-driving that I've seen outside of Tesla. So right now I'm gonna engage Super Cruise at a given speed. And what's so impressive about this is that it has the capability of actually lane changing for you. So I've just engaged it, and if you can see in this video, these steering wheels with Super Cruise have a light up here. And what it's doing, I'm full hands off, it is changing lanes. It will do this at will when there is a car slow in front of you. Blue Cruise was not capable of even doing this segment because it was too windy for it, I believe. Look at this, it's gonna change lanes into the fast lane now because this lane is going slow. And it will actually change back if we have enough time or enough room, frankly. This area, there's a lot of cars, so it probably won't change back. But this is the best self-driving. And once again, this is hands off. You still need to be present. You still need to be able to react. And you can certainly put it in scenarios that get it maybe a little bit questionable and sketchy. So by no means like should you just try and fall asleep in the back seat. See, like this little lane jog, it can kind of get confused a little bit, but it does a pretty good job. And like I said, out of all the systems that I've used, this is far and away the best non-Tesla system. So I mean, I'm super impressed by this, and like I said, this is the first basis that I wanted to cover with the Traverse because most other vehicles do not have this level of full self-driving capability. It is geofenced, meaning that they only approve it on certain roads and certain stretches of road. So I did this from Denver to Frisco just a day ago, and it worked pretty much the whole way, probably 85 to 90% of the whole way. We're gonna get off here, and get on our favorite mountain road, but very, very impressed by this system. It is well worth the $3,000 it costs to add to this car. Outside of the self-driving features, what is the Traverse like? I have to say, just off the bat, I had pretty low expectations for this vehicle, just to be frank. I've driven Traverses of past generation, and they're very forgettable. And immediately this vehicle feels like it was made by people who wanted to make a pretty good product, and they actually had a pretty, narrow vision in terms of like what this vehicle should do. And what I mean by that is, like, for what this car is intended to be, this is a family hauler, right? It's a 3-row family hauler. So while we're up here, and I always like to give you guys a good view on these mountain roads, this is really not what this thing is meant for. Now, it doesn't completely fall on its face up here. It is capable, of course, of hustling a little bit on a canyon road, but it's really set up extremely soft. And like I said, I think that is a good decision by Chevy when we think about like what this car is meant to do. No, it's not, of course, meant to be a Canyon Carver, but what it is meant to do is haul your family comfortably and safely. I really am impressed, as I've already mentioned, with the Super Cruise aspect of this vehicle. In terms of self-driving aids, this is the best I've experienced outside of Tesla. But the suspension itself, it's so easy for car companies to kind of lose the scope of things and then put a too firm suspension. Really makes the ride quite punishing and harsh. This thing soaks up big bumps, small bumps. It's not like the most sophisticated suspension ever. In fact, the rebound is maybe a little bit off, but for everyone who like is just driving this on a daily basis, they're just gonna think, okay, yeah, this is just a good riding vehicle. It soaks up bumps well. It has a ton of ground clearance, so curbs, speed bumps really don't slow down for. You just kind of like go over them. And that comfort aspect, like I said, I think is key to a family hauler because it's so easy for these companies to lose scope. Other aspects of this vehicle that I think Chevy has just done right is the technology implementation. We've kind of talked about it a little bit here, but it just works. It's very simple. I love the native Google Maps, even without Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. It is like a really nice screen size. The HVAC is like very intuitive. You just get in and go. It's a no fuss vehicle. And as I mentioned in the interior segment, it just all works well together. The engine. I mean, say what you want about 4-cylinder engines. I know a lot of people dislike the fact that we've sort of downsized engines and now we're leaning on all these turbocharged small displacement engines. And I get it. From like a character standpoint, from a noise, from a warmth perspective, it's not a good sounding engine, but you can't argue with its effectiveness. I mean, this is a big SUV and it really moves this thing. It has a ton of torque. It's pretty quick to respond with this 8-speed transmission, and the fuel economy is good. I'm getting close to 20 miles to the gallon, which for a 3-row, pretty large SUV, I think is relatively reasonable. And this is also on these, off-road focused tires with this Z71 package. So, like I said, say what you want about, yes, it's not the greatest sound. I really prefer that warmth of the V6 in something like the Pilot, but this gets better fuel economy. And up here, as I always say, at altitude, it does make a big difference to be turbocharged because those NA engines aren't making a whole ton of power at elevation. And when you can add boost to the equation, it really helps nullify any power loss that you may have. End of the day, when I think about the shortcomings of this vehicle, it's very few. So I will say, I do think that this does have more road noise and wind noise specifically than most of the other 3-row SUVs that I've driven. I've already mentioned the Pilot, things like the Grand Highlander. Those are more refined experiences, meaning that they're quieter when you're going down the highway at speed. I don't know if it's primarily because of these off-road tires, but there is quite a bit of road noise in here. It's kind of like a roar, and there's a lot of wind noise. We've had a couple windy days here in Colorado, and it's sort of susceptible to wind damage, if you will, in terms of it makes a lot of noise. It's not the most refined cabin. So that's a bit of a knock. I think maybe to a certain extent you expect that with a Chevrolet, but I do think the Japanese are a little bit further in terms of that refinement. The only other small nitpick I have is I think this steering, the level of steering effort is maybe a little high. In terms of what I mean by that is it does take quite a bit of muscle, or more so than I would expect, to kind of move the steering wheel, especially at low speeds. Not too bad up here, but when you're moving around a parking lot, I think they could boost this a little bit more and kind of give you more boost. Because let's be honest, realistically, this is going to be dads, moms driving their kids around. to soccer practice, going to Target, whatever, navigating around parking lots, the steering effort could be easier. And that probably is something that somebody in this class of vehicle, I believe, would like. That's a very simple tuning change. Like they can do that. These are all electric power assisted steering systems. So other than the steering weight being high, the steering is also very slow to respond compared to other vehicles. It takes quite a bit more steering angle to get the Traverse to change direction compared to its competitors. A minor nitpick at that, but really, like I said, I kind of have to dig for things I don't like. It's really the refinement compared to other vehicles, I think, is where this is a slight letdown. But look, realistically, I think with one of these Traverses, if you can keep the options relatively low, the key part is the Super Cruise. If you really want Super Cruise, it's obviously going to bump up your price, and it's only offered in specific models. I don't believe you can get it in the base model. So that is a question. But if you can keep the options low and keep this price not close to the $50,000 that they're asking for the Z71, I don't really think these off-road tidbits, the off-road tires, that kind of stuff, suspension, is really worth it for a family hauler. Now maybe, if you're one of very few percent of people that is driving on a dirt road every day, yeah, maybe it is worth that extra money. But keep the options low. I think you'll be pretty impressed with this vehicle. The usability is honestly top notch, and I'm really impressed with what Chevy's doing in their infotainment these days. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. As I mentioned, I've really enjoyed my time with this vehicle, specifically the Super Cruise. Man, on road trips, it is so nice. If you made it this far in the video, guys, thank you very much for watching. Consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.